From to unmute me here. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another edition of UKBF Talks. Apologies for the slight delay, just having a few technical issues. Didn't drink enough coffee. So apologies for the technical issues. Wherever you join us from this morning, or I think it's afternoon now, let us know in the chat so that we know where to give you your shout outs and different things like that. So we're going to go straight in today. I am joined today by Olaolu, the co-founder and CEO of Economic Street. And he has given us his great time to bring us insight into this conversation today, which is on getting your finances in order, because we know that the end of the financial year is quickly approaching. So as business owners, we need to know what we need to do to position ourselves ready to do that. What are the things that we need to be aware of? What are the things that we need to just shove to one side and really focus on? So this is what this conversation is going to be about today. If you've got any questions, you want a bit more insight into business finances and a bit more about accounting, and as a business owner, what you should be looking at and what you shouldn't be looking at, get it in the conversation, get it in the chat, and I will ask Olaolu for you. So let's bring him in. Good morning, Olaolu.
Good afternoon, Jacob. Thanks for having me.
Gosh, I keep saying morning. It is afternoon, isn't it?
Yeah.
How are you doing?
I'm well, thanks. Yeah, I'm excited to be here, excited to have this conversation, and I think it's very timely as well.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. It definitely is. So, just to, hopefully, you've got this answer in your head. I don't want to throw you in the spotlight and you're not ready. When is the end of the financial year that businesses need to be aware of?
So the tax year ends on the 5th of April, 2023. So it runs from 6th of April each year to the 5th of April the following year. And financial years for companies can vary. Typically, you will have a 31st of March year end, but you can also have other variations. So those are the kind of two key dates you have to be aware of. And coincidentally, that's when the government also times their budget announcement, which they'll be making next week.
Oh gosh. All right. So we've seen so many things happen in government at the moment, and the way things seem to be popping up every week, every day, every second. How agile do business owners need to be in the times that we're living in right now?
Very much so. I believe that even now we constantly see things are chopping and changing. The climate has become increasingly uncertain, and therefore you have to be able to be adaptable. I'll give you an example. 2024 was supposed to be the year of the introduction of moving from annual tax returns to quarterly tax returns, and the threshold for moving to that system was only £10,000, which is quite low. Recently, over the last few months, they've announced now that, number one, they are extending the deadline for that introduction till 2026, and they're also raising the threshold from £10,000 to £50,000. So these are kind of the things that business owners, small business owners, need to be aware of and be flexible enough to adapt to, because regulatory framework and business environment is constantly shifting at the moment.
And when it comes to platforms that business owners need to have their ear to the ground on in order to make themselves aware about what's coming up and keep themselves informed, as somebody who helps and advises business owners with finance, what are some of the places that they need to keep an eye locked on?
I would say your general news outlets, particularly spreadsheets or broad newspapers like the Telegraph, the Independent. If you want a bit more intricate news, then you can head to outlets such as Bloomberg or the FT, the Financial Times, and just generally, even just the business section on the BBC can be a great place to start. If you're ever in need of a bit more information, but you're not ready to speak to an accountant yet, you can also do a bit of digging on the government website to read up their latest, articles, or find more details about certain legislation that you may wish to research a bit more about.
All right, all right, all right. Let's calm down a bit now. Before we get carried away, let's get a bit more insight and info into who you are. So, for those watching, those listening, Laulu, who are you?
Thanks. I am a small business owner myself, to put it succinctly. So I really know and understand the challenges that business owners face. I am an accountant by profession. I run my own practice as a sole practitioner. I have been doing that now for a few years. I am about 7 or 8 years post qualified. So I trained to become a chartered accountant, which I successfully did in 2015. So we're looking at about 8 years. Prior to that, I was at university studying economics. I left. And then once I qualified as an accountant, I also wanted to kind of go on my own entrepreneurship journey and explore that aspect of my personality, which led me to co-found Economic Street. And Economic Street is all about just providing financial literacy to all demographics. We started out first targeting millennials, but quickly realized that actually it's a generational issue. And we just wanted to find or be able to create or curate courses that could help people to better understand finances and different aspects of finances, from business finance to family finance. So that's a bit of a couple of the things that I do. I also run other businesses on the side. And yeah, one of the opportunities that I always enjoy is being able to speak on forums such as this to just provide a bit more insight.
And when it comes to running your own business and also being very, very eloquent when it comes to and well versed when it comes to the structure of finance and the things that you need to focus on, how does that work out? Because I can imagine that works. That's a good marriage. But are there any times where the business side of you wants to kind of push further, but the finance and accountant side of you is like, okay, you need to kind of pull yourself back in? How does that work out?
Definitely. I think it's always a conflict. As accountants, we like to account for every penny, but equally speaking, you've got lofty dreams, you've got lofty goals, and often at times capital can be restricted, or there's only a finite budget to do certain things. So you then have to really prioritize and understand actually what your focus has to be in the immediate term. So I've not perfected it, I've not mastered it yet. Is an ongoing internal discussion that I often have with myself still. So check back with me in 12 months again and see how far along I've come.
No, that's good. That's good. That's good. Well, it's good to be honest. The reason why we have these conversations and have these dialogues is to really get the real stuff about people who run businesses. Because running small businesses it's not easy. Do you know what I mean? So really getting the nitty gritty and the actual value from the nitty gritty is what business owners need to be aware of, because you're, especially in the early stages, you're likely to go through more valleys, more tough times, and then when you get to the lofty heights, you appreciate that journey a bit more.
I think
So
definitely, I can definitely echo the sentiments, and I think especially if you're doing it full time, as opposed to holding down, a job to then support your business dreams, can also have its own nuances. And it's not for the faint-hearted, but I definitely do think it's a rewarding journey, especially for those people that do have that in their locker to want to go on that path.
yeah, yeah. All right, let's get straight to it. Why are finances so key for any business?
Uh, the long and short of it is that's the engine room of any business. If you don't have a good lid on your finances, then how can remain in business for the foreseeable future? In accounting or finance, we call that going concern, remaining a going concern. So ultimately that revolves around the capital structure of the business and the finances, and just making sure they're very healthy. Your finances help you in terms of decision making. It helps you to plan for the future. It helps you to know how to allocate your budget or your funds appropriately to all the various activities of the business. And therefore, because of that, it's paramount that you do have a good understanding, at least a working knowledge of what's going on financially with your business.
And when it comes to bringing finance into your business, from your experience, have you ever spoke to people who are at the beginning stage of running a business? They've not even started selling anything or anything like that. At what stage are finances always important in a business? I know the answer to this, but I kind of want to reinforce that the saying that goes that cash is king, basically. What stage in a business is finance not that thing that you need to kind of prioritize? Is there any such stage?
I don't believe there's any such stage. Okay, for instance, even if you're not in business yet and you're just thinking about the idea, the next thing that comes to mind is actually how you're going to finance the idea, right? And bring it to life. So that could be a simple thing as even having a website made, or making samples for your products. All that costs money. And therefore you have to start having those courageous conversations with yourself, or potentially with any business partners right from the beginning, or any financial backers. So I think throughout every single stage of the business life cycle, you're going to have to talk about finance. You can even be a person that's been in business for 20 years, your business is at a mature stage, you still need to be able to think about what's happening in the greater macroeconomic sense, to then see, okay, how is this going to impact our business moving forward? Do we need to pivot? If we do need to pivot, what's that going to look like in terms of the capital expenditure? And you're seeing that even with businesses that have been around for decades now, especially, for example, in the automotive industry, there's now a huge shift from combustion engines to electric vehicles. And
Yeah.
that again is having an impact on their finances and ultimately their bottom line. Because ultimately, if you're in business, it's about survivability, and you want to survive in order to make a profit moving forward and to create a business that is self-sustaining. So you always will need to have conversations in and around money.
Yeah, no, well, that's very, very important. You always need to have conversations in and around money. So why do people overlook managing their finances when it comes to business? Because I remember starting up. I started my own business a couple of years ago with a friend of mine. I'm a very creative person. Filming, editing, website design. Worked with some really, really cool brands, some quite well-known ones. And as soon as the finance came in, let's go steak and lobster. Let's go to Miller and Carter. Let's go buy this gear. Let's go and do that. And although the craft and the gift was there to actually bring the money in, managing the finances, that part of it wasn't there. And I didn't really have that as a priority. Why do business owners and some business owners overlook these things?
I think it's a combination of factors, and it is a very good question. I think one of the primary reasons is some people just think the learning curve is really steep, or that it's such a complicated area of, really knowing or understanding business. And I think that's why they tend to shy away from it. It's kind of like, if it's out of sight, it's out of mind, not knowing just how serious of an implication and bearing it has on the actual business. So I do think that's one of the primary thing. And I also just think, when you're even just browsing news, some of the terms, the lingo, doesn't make it easy to bridge that gap. And again, that could be a factor that then puts people off from really taking control of understanding the finances of their business. Then again, some people in the personality, they spend first, think about the consequences later. So you kind of have a range, but I definitely do. I can empathize with people, especially if they don't have a background in finance or business. And but I would encourage them to just jump at it, jump in with both feet, learn, become an information soaker, and worst case scenario, you know, you failed, but at least you failed knowing that you've tried and you've given it your all and paid attention to everything, particularly the finances of the business.
Yeah, I guess this leads me on to my next question. So, as a business owner, when we start our businesses or are thinking about various projects that we're looking to do, um, a lot of us may not be able to afford an accountant, right? And we have or may have, we're not as privy and as privileged as you to be an accountant on one side and also the next Elon Musk on the other side, right? So how do business owners or how do we manage to navigate looking after our finances if we can't afford an accountant?
Again, a good question. They're very simple, effective, and low cost tools nowadays. I'll mention a couple of them to you now. There's a software, a mobile app called Coconut. And Coconut is specifically designed for sole traders, which is a type of legal structure that people can use when carrying out business. The great thing about Coconut is that it's very, very simple to use. So you sign up, you connect your business account to the software, and it immediately downloads all the transactions and then talks you through it, how to categorize it. So, for instance, you can categorize something as a marketing transaction, you can categorize it as equipment purchase, you can categorize it as money being put into the business by an owner. So it's a very simple tool to use for bridging that gap for you. On top of it, it helps you with invoice management. It helps you to know how much to set aside for taxes because that is usually an area that business owners overlook. Unfortunately or fortunately, the way the tax system is designed, it's always backwards looking. So by the time you come to paying your taxes, you're sometimes often looking at things that have happened 18 months ago. Well, that does you no good if you then don't have the money because you've been spending it as you went along, forgetting that you're going to have a tax bill. So this is why that tool is, again, quite effective for managing the finances without the need for an accountant immediately. You also have another one called Anna Money. So Anna as in the name and then money. This one, again, does similar things to Coconut with the added features of also completing or helping you to submit your VAT returns if you're a VAT registered business. And both these softwares cost between anything from about £7 to £12 a month for the top subscriptions or the top plans. So this is a way to kind of just have a bit more control, I would say, over the business finances without having to employ the services of an accountant from the jump.
Very concise and very clear as well. So we'll hopefully be able to signpost people to some of these places in the messaging after this conversation. So when it comes to at what stage as a business owner do we have to start paying VAT?
Good question. So the threshold at the moment to be mandatorily registered for VAT is £85,000 in the UK, 83 to £85,000. Now, some people do elect to voluntarily register for VAT, even if they are below that threshold. One of the reasons that people may do this is because, for instance, they are a manufacturing business. They are buying a lot of raw materials, which has a lot of VAT on it, and they want to claim that money back. So there are benefits sometimes to registering for VAT, even if you don't meet that threshold. Having said that, you have to also weigh it up against all the compliance that is needed, such as being able to adequately account for that VAT and then file your VAT returns, usually on a quarterly basis. But to answer your question, it's about £83,000 at the moment before you have to register for VAT.
Yeah. And
£83,000 in turnover. That
yeah.
is.
And how can people be better prepared to make, let's say, for example, their first VAT return? I gave you the example of started the business, everything that came in, well, not everything, I wasn't that stupid, but most things that came in, looking to uh, take my uncle to buy this for my mom, I need to eat, um, sometimes need to pay some bills, need to pay for Squarespace. That's a lot of money going out. What is the best thing that business owners need to do to prepare themselves when they get to that point of having to pay VAT? What do they need to do? What sort of advice do you have?
Just good record keeping. And we can even dial it back to basics, old school, and just using an Excel spreadsheet, for instance, and just either looking at your transactions on a weekly basis, monthly basis, or minimum quarterly basis, I would say. Again, being hooked up to a software that is inexpensive, like Money, so that your transactions are immediately there and you can see how much VAT is on each one. Making sure you keep all your receipts and invoices, using a cloud-based solution to store your receipts. So, for instance, Google Drive, you can start there. I think it's also, based on what you've just said, it's good to highlight something that one thing that business owners need to get into the habit of doing is actually separating their personal expenses from
Yeah.
business expenses, because often the times they conflate the two. In the eyes of the law and in the eyes of the government, your business is a separate legal entity often the times. So you don't want to, I don't know, buy a pair of trainers on the business account, for instance,
Uh,
which some people get into the habit of, because that is not a business expense. Everything
yeah.
has to be business related, even commuting. If you have an office space, that's just commuting to work like any regular person. The only time you can claim for your travel is if you're having to go to a client site, and you can only claim the difference in the cost between going to your office on a daily basis versus that client site. So these are some of the things to start thinking about. The final point I would make is that even if you haven't crossed the threshold yet for VAT, the way the VAT registration system works is that you either have to be forward looking for 30 days and say, okay, in the next 30 days, am I going to make £83,000? If the answer is yes, I really need to start getting my finances in order. Or you take the backwards looking approach and look back 12 months and say, okay, in the past 12 months, have I turned over £83,000? Again, if the answer is yes, then I need to start the process of registration. So that's why it's good to also kind of forecast, anticipate what do you expect to be making. If you know, for instance, that you're already making £5,000 a month, soon enough, as your business continues to grow, you're going to get into a stage where maybe you're making £7,000 to £8,000 a month. And therefore, from that moment you start making £7,000 a month till, 11, 12 months down the line, you're probably going to then fall into that catchment for VAT registration. So these are some of the things to kind of have in your head as you start to kind of think about the long term and whether you will then meet the obligation for VAT registration.
I guess this leads me perfectly onto my next question, which is, what are the key indicators that business owners need to be aware of when it comes to money management within their business? And this is regardless of how much they're actually earning.
Great question. Working capital. So working capital is just a fancy way of saying, okay, what do my customers owe me? What am I owing suppliers? You need to really get on top of this. As we said at the start, cash is king. In a nutshell, the more cash flow you have coming through the business or in the business at any one point, the more you can do. And I'll give you one of the greatest examples of this, or one of the industries that has perfected this, is the supermarket industry. Because you as a customer, you pay upfront at the till as you're buying your groceries. But the suppliers, they're not paying for at least 30 days. Now, what that means for, Tesco, Asda, is that they have more money in the bank at any given point, which means they can effectively do more. They can hire more workers, they can expand and build further stores, you name it. So this is something that business owners need to start having a picture of. Are my customers paying me on time? If not, what recourse am I taking, or what actions am I taking to make sure that money is recoverable? In terms of my suppliers, what relationship do I have with them? Can I extend the payment deadlines? Again, with my workers, do I have enough money to meet all the payroll obligations, which includes not just their income, their salary, but also the taxes that go along with it,
And pension as
and
well.
pensions. Correct. So this is all the different elements you have to kind of be thinking of and juggling at any point in time. Now, a couple of things can help with that. If you really want to take it a step further and have more control of your finances, then you need to be thinking about, monthly management reports. That simply means you're looking at, the balance sheet, the profit and loss, the cash flow statement, which are all elements of company accounts if you're a limited company. And yeah, just analyzing that and reflecting on what's happening, because there's a difference between selling a product and generating revenue versus cash. Uh, Profit is an entirely different concept, an accounting concept that basically describes the process of, I've sold something, or I have bought something, but that more reflects when the transaction has occurred or taken place, as opposed to where cash has changed hands. And that's something that often at times business owners can overlook, is when is the point that cash is actually changing hands? Is it after the transaction has occurred, before the transaction has, or the exchange of goods and services has taken place? These are the kind of things that we really need to start thinking about, in being able to really soundly have a control over the finances.
Yeah, you just mentioned profit there, and one question that I know that I've asked myself over the years, but I know that also flags up in the mind of just anybody in general, is what is the difference between gross and net profit?
Great question. So gross is simply put what you've sold, and the income you made from that, minus the cost for producing that item. So I'll give you an example. Plastic cups. Let's say you sell plastic cups. You sell each cup for £1, and it's cost you 50p to make that cup. Now your gross profit is 50p. Net profit, slightly different concept. That factors in your other costs of actually bringing that product to market, the plastic cups to market. So that could include your rent, office space, electric bill, internet, salaries, overheads, etc. You name it. So, and then the distribution, the packaging, the postage and packaging, and marketing. So net profit is the final figure after you've deducted all your costs.
Very clear, very thorough breakdown. I like it. So if we roll back a few years ago, I'm not going to mention the what happened in the world, but I'll just use a nickname. We'll call it the Roni Rona. I think you understand what I'm talking about.
I do.
So during the Roni Rona, a lot of businesses were able to get access to some loans, and many years later, some of these businesses may be struggling to actually pay back some of these loans. Can you tell me, from putting your accountancy hat on here, um, were these loans good things, especially for startups and small business owners? And also, the next question leading on from that would be, if somebody is struggling to even pay those loans back off, what can they do?
Great questions, or great couple of questions. So, first one, were they a good idea? Well, ultimately, the government had to step in and provide some level of intervention. Otherwise, you would have ended up with a catastrophic situation where millions of people are out of work and businesses have just gone under. So they had to do something. Now we can have a separate conversation on whether the approach they should have taken was providing loans or providing grants. The fact that they're providing loans at interest rates below the market is a good thing. Is it a good thing for individual businesses? Well, that depends on what the trading circumstances for those businesses were. And that was down to individuals, directors to reflect on their own specific business in against the backdrop of the wider, picture, global economic picture, and say, right, okay, do I need this money? If so, how much do I need? And that was a question they alone could answer for themselves. But if you're asking me as an accountant, would I rather take a loan that is 100% guaranteed by the government at 2.5% versus walking down to my high street bank and asking for a loan of a similar size and having to pay 5% or more? Then the answer is clearly yes. I would rather take that
Mm,
option because it's about
yeah,
the opportunity cost of capital, as we like to say in finance. And it's better to have a loan that is cheaper, quote unquote, on paper than a more expensive loan. Now, if moving along a few years later, and the picture for the business has not changed, and now they're struggling to meet the repayments, then clearly that something needs to be done. The one thing they can't do is ignore it and just wish it will go away. Most important thing is to contact the bank and see what agreement or arrangement can be made. Now, if those loans were taken out in accordance with the specifications, i.e., legitimately, then we know that the bank can always recover their money from the government, worst case scenario. Now, if people, for instance, did take out more than they were really entitled to because it was all about self certification at the time, then sometimes that's when personal guarantees can kick in and they can try and come after the director to try and recover that. Either way, I always speak to them first, exhaust all the options available for the loan. Again, this is probably one of the advantages that those loans had over traditional loans, in the sense that they came with many stipulations, like you can take a payment holiday, you can take an interest holiday 3 times in the case of the bounce back loan. um, and obviously for the first year of the loan as well, the government was paying the interest on it. So definitely speak to the bank first, see what arrangement can be made, um, and then go from there. Sometimes what ends up happening is that you can enter into something called a CVA, so company voluntary agreement, where perhaps you even agree to pay a lower amount um, over time, as opposed to pay nothing. And sometimes, well, banks will rather see some money than no money at all.
yeah, yeah. No, that's very, very concise. Thank you, thank you. So the next question I have for you is, what do business owners need to do to get themselves ready for the end of the financial year? What do they need to be aware of?
Great question. So first and again, I will say is just having a summary of all their transactions, whether that is in Excel, whether that is using a software solution. With the software solutions, it's like I said, it's more automated, so it's a lot easier to keep track of things. And you can get downloadable reports from those softwares to tell you, basically give you a summary of what you can be declaring or what you should be declaring. Other things you need to start thinking about is instances where you have bought something on behalf of the business, but it also has personal use somewhere, because you can't claim 100% of the cost against the income of the business if there is some personal use. Often at times, I'll give you an example. You can buy a laptop for the business, but you know sometimes you may use the asset maybe 30% of the time for personal use. So therefore, you can't claim, well, 30% of the cost of that laptop can't be claimed. So these are things to kind of just have in mind. And then second of all, start understanding how much you potentially now need to be setting aside towards the tax bill. If you're a company, then the tax rate is 19% that you need to be setting aside towards corporation tax. And often the times if you've been spending without taking this into consideration, that basically means you're now going to be playing some catch up and having to set aside more money once your accounts are filed. If you're a sole trader, when you file tax returns, you basically know your window is between April to January 2024 to save up the money for your tax bill. The great thing is that if you anticipate that you're not going to be in a position to completely cover your tax bill, now you're aware about it and you can start taking effective steps to either make up the difference or explain your circumstance to HMRC to come up with a payment plan, as opposed to not contacting them and then ending up with penalties.
So once again, just having clarity on, you mentioned some anamani and also coconut at the
Yeah.
beginning, for some tools that people can use on a subscription basis. When it comes to banks and the service or help that they provide for startups or small business owners, are you aware of anything? Do banks offer free support?
Um, the support you're gonna get from a bank is probably a free business account, and even that's limited. Um, Typically, you're not getting more than 12 to 24 months worth of free business banking. I would say rather than looking at your bank for support, you try the government website and look for business support through them. Your local borough is actually a great place to also start. They often have a enterprise hub that provides a range of support to businesses, and then you can do soft searches for grants as well. And there are quite a few options actually out there for grants, but they do have specific criteria that you have to meet. And unfortunately, if you don't meet that criteria, if your business doesn't meet that criteria, you're just not going to get it. It's still worth at least just searching and seeing if there are certain grants in line with your business activity. Again, the government website is a good place to start. You can go on to Nerd Wallet and through that try and find something as well. You can go on to the British Business Bank as well. They provide some support and then also startup loans. And I would say those are probably your best bet when starting out.
Yeah. So before we round up this conversation, I've got some quick fire questions for
Yeah.
you. If anybody watching or listening to this conversation, you have any questions that you'd like Laolu to answer or get more insight during this conversation, go ahead and put that into the chat box on whatever platform you're listening and watching on. But let me go at you with the quick fire questions. And these are questions that everybody just needs to know, and people may not actually have the answer for it. What advice would you give to those who are owed money? So I'm a business owner. Going back to, I've provided a service. I've cut your grass. I've cut the
Yeah.
grass of your neighbor. I've cut the grass of your whole neighborhood. And my money's not been paid, or let's say half of my money's been paid. As an accountant, what advice would you give to me to get my money back?
Sure. Mediation is probably your starting point. See what agreement you guys can come through. If they're really not budging or even not responding, then you can, before you go down the court route, you can look at something called a statutory demand. Now, this is almost like a written warning to the business or to the people that owe you money that they need to pay up, and they have 21 days to pay up. If after the 21 days they haven't responded by either challenging it or paying up, then you can actually, if they're a company and they owe you over £750, you can petition the court to wind them up and liquidate their assets. If they're individuals, like you just described in the grass cutting situation, you can actually apply for them to be declared bankrupt if you're owed more than £5,000. So that's some of the things you can do. Statutory demand. If you want to go down the court system, you have to first send a letter, a letter of payment demand. If that's not successful, then you can apply for the court to basically issue a judgment against them. Once that judgment is issued, they still may not respond, and then you have to go back to the courts and ask for them to enforce that judgment. And that's when the bailiffs or enforcement officers will then get involved. Obviously, that can then be expensive, and you may weigh up that, number one, how recoverable is the debt? Because, for instance, if I know we're just talking about cutting grass, but if that's a company that owes you money and that company is already insolvent, then you're most likely not going to get your money back. So you're probably wasting your time. And the reason you're not going to get your money back is that the government has something called preferential creditors. So that means banks will get paid first or before you. Employees of that business will get paid before you if they're owed any money, outstanding wages. So there's often not going to be anything left. So that's why you want to check the actual trading status of the business. Now, if it's fine, yeah, if they're still actively trading and they've just been belligerent, then you can take this recourse, and then you can also apply for your legal fees to be covered. One thing that you can try and do as well, like I said, statutory demand, you can go onto the government website, look this up, they'll provide you with the forms. You can also go to small claims online. So His Majesty, I beg your pardon, His Majesty's Courts and Tribunal have a small claim online service as well that you can use for recovering things up to, I think, £100,000. So these are some of the avenues you can use to try and recover that debt if mediation doesn't work.
Goodness me, I wasn't expecting such a concise and thorough answer. That's very, very thorough. Thank you very much. Another question that at some stage many business owners, small business owners, startups will get to the stage of is hiring staff.
Yeah.
But at what stage or when should somebody consider hiring their first employee?
You have to be aware of your business needs. Hiring employees, hiring staff is a huge undertaking financially and ethically, compliance-wise, legally, everything, the whole schmeal. So you really have to think about it. Do you have the capacity in terms of the financial muscle to be able to afford this employee? Because like we spoke about before earlier on, once you start paying employees or once you hire an employee, you have certain obligations towards them. One of them being pensions, and pensions are very expensive. I think the current earnings threshold for somebody to be an employee to be entitled to a pension is about £9,000, £9,000 or £10,000. So it's quite low, and you have to be able to offer a company pension scheme. They can choose to opt out, but it has to be there. It's not something you can coerce them to opting out of either. So I would say that's what you generally need to think of first. Can I really afford to hire a staff? Okay, if I can, what does that contract then look like? Is it on a temporary basis, permanent basis, or part-time, full-time, that type of thing? Versus maybe you consider a subcontractor where you don't have as many of those responsibilities, legal and financial responsibilities to them.
Yeah. Next question that I have for you. When should I pay myself? When should I pay myself?
It's not a popular answer, but you get paid last. You're the last person on that whole roster of people. Your employees come first, the bank comes first, the taxman comes next, and then you. So that's why they often say, the business owner carries the major risk. But usually, when things then, when the good times come by, you just stand to gain the most because of all those people that you're answerable to or responsible for.
Okay, so can I go to Dubai? Can I go to Switzerland? Are there any benefits for me going there? Do I still have to be last even if I go there?
If you can justify it as a legitimate business expense, and you will have to be, the burden of proof is on you. So that means, do you have conferences out there? Are you attending business meetings? Are you meeting with prospective clients? And then there are also specific subsistence rates per country per day. So that means you can't just go there and say, you're 3 nights in Dubai, I'm going to spend all this money and claim it back from the company. No, the government actually has written up how much you're allowed to spend per day, per diem. And it varies from sometimes even city to city, let alone country to country. So these are things that you have to be aware of as well. But try and make sure it's a justifiable business expense, or you can show or demonstrate it as being undertaken for business purposes.
Okay, you've blown my bubble there. So that's fine. That's fine. We're just going to read some of the comments that we've had here. So, well, right from the beginning, we've had quite a few comments. Someone said prioritization is key. Not every day buy a Tesla. Spend first. Think about the finances later. I think that person was like, oh gosh, I have to. Yeah, okay. Someone said effective and low cost tools. I think that was in regards to the tools that you gave some recommendation on. My last question that I have for you today, because this conversation is about getting ourselves and our finances when it comes to our businesses in order. What are the main things as business owners we need to do to get our finances in order?
Great question. First is understanding just how important finances play a role to your business remaining a going concern and being able to stay in business. That's the first thing. Once you're able to accept that, then the rest starts to fall in place and takes on a natural, what I deem to be a natural flow. In terms of things that you need to do, is make sure that you know what your outgoings are, what your incoming is. That's as basic as that. Understand the timing of your business. So, for instance, if your business is seasonal, maybe, for instance, you're a tutor, then you know that certain times of the year you're going to be more busy, maybe around exam time or the start of a new academic year versus other times of the year. And therefore, you need to structure your business activities around those times of year to maximize the opportunities that those moments present. So that's the second thing. Be aware of the cycle of your business. Third, be aware of all your regulatory requirements. So, what does that mean? If you're in a business where you're having to collect or process consumer data, then number one, you will also have to be signed up to the Information Commissioner's office. That means that for the privilege of being on the database, they're going to charge you about 35 or 40 pounds a year, depending on how you pay them. Other things include just data protection and security, being aware of your responsibilities to stakeholders such as Companies House, if you're a limited company, or HMRC for taxation purposes. Being aware of your responsibilities to your employees, if you have any, making sure you have good contracts in place and hiring or contracting the support and help of good HR personnel or HR professionals to assist with that process, because it is very much a specific set of skill sets needed for that. And those are the three things that I'll say you need to really have a good grip and understanding of.
Yeah, well, I'm definitely gonna go back, and even as I go and evaluate this conversation, definitely make a note of that, because I think it's worth really understanding the key points, the key simple points that business owners need to be aware of to get finances in order. As we established at the beginning of the conversation, um, when you've got a plan, when you've got this big dream, you've got this big vision, at times the day to day running of your business, especially the finance aspect of it, is overlooked. And um, there are tools, there are things and systems that can be followed and put in place to make sure that these things aren't overlooked, because otherwise you're going to hit certain points and certain timestamps in your financial year that you're going to come stuck because you've not fulfilled certain obligations. So yeah, paying attention to the finances, utilizing, like you said, keeping it simple, spreadsheets, these different things like that. Definitely things worth doing for anyone starting up in business, anybody thinking to start up in business, and also some of the tools that Laulu mentioned there about coconut, something that we're familiar with. At UKBF is antimony. So utilizing these tools are things that we also recommend as well. So all in all, just really want to thank you for your time and the insight that you've brought us this morning slash afternoon, Laulu. Really appreciate your time. Before we close out, are there any final remarks that you'd like to make in regards to this topic in general?
Yeah, enjoy the journey. I think often the times, because of all the responsibilities, we tend to lose the zest, the passion, or just, find joy in the little moments. So that's something I definitely encourage. Um, Always be willing to ask for help if you don't understand something. If you can't find the answer on the internet, reach out to people in your community, in your network that have an understanding or can connect you to people that can even, just offer you free, 15 or 20, 30-minute consultations. And third, exhaust all avenues for getting or obtaining as many free resources, whether that be financial, whether that be human capital, to you at your disposal. So, you know, even partnering with universities or schools to give young people some work experience can be a great way to get some extra help within your business
Mm.
without necessarily then taking on an employee and having, you know, more heavier financial responsibility. So yeah, that's my that's my last 2 cents.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. We really appreciate the value that you've brought. And we wish you a swell day. So have a great day, Laulu. I'll speak to you later.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you guys for joining us this afternoon once again. Tomorrow is Wednesday. We will be releasing another episode of the Grow podcast, where I speak to business experts such as Laulu and really attain the gems and the nuggets in different areas of business, whether it's sales, whether it's marketing, whether it's finances, whether it's attaining investment for your business or your startup. The Grow podcast goes into the exact elements that you need to know and we need to know in order to grow our businesses. So listen out for that. If you're on Apple, if you're on Spotify, if you like to watch, it will be on YouTube as well. If you've not already subscribed to Grow or to Drive, our other podcast, head over to our YouTube channel, subscribe to UKBF on YouTube, subscribe to the Grow podcast on Spotify or Apple or whatever platform you do listen on, and follow us on the journey of learning and growing together. UKBF, UK Business Forums, is the largest online place of small and micro business owners, where it's a community full of people on the same journey. Whether you're starting up in business, whether you've been in the medium stages of your business journey, or whether you're smashing it, you're a millionaire, you're Elon Musk. All these different people are within our community, and it's all about support. A peer-to-peer platform to support one another. There's free resources on how to put yourself in a place to get seen by investors, how to lay out your marketing plan, how to better position yourself to manage your finances from experts such as Olaolu. So head over to ukbf.co.uk to find out more information, and it's free to join. So why not make the most of it? Thank you guys for joining us this afternoon. I hope to see you in our next conversation, where I will be speaking to Cami about how to best utilize Instagram and TikTok to actually make money for your business. So see you in 2 weeks' time. Have a good one.